For more than 3 months, political protests have raged across Nicaragua. They started in April after the government of President Daniel Ortega introduced changes to the nation's pension system. The protests turned violent after a government crackdown, and more than 300 people, nearly all of them civilians, have since died in fighting on the street. Today, the White House announced that it was sanctioning top Nicaraguan officials and that the U.S. government was taking back vehicles it had donated to the Nicaraguan National Police. Nick Schifrin has our story.
In Nicaragua today, the street battles are explosive through long nights and hot summer days. Protesters are often armed with no more than cinder blocks and homemade bombs. Security services fire as they cower in fear. Young people who live stream the violence and are willing to die.
We already know we will die, but we will die for something just. Nicaragua, don't let us die in vain.
Many are students rallying against a ruler who once overthrew a dictator, now accused of becoming a dictator. For 11 years, Daniel Ortega has led Nicaragua, and he has consolidated near total power, ended term limits, and employed deadly force on protesters who demanded democratic reforms.
Today we are seeing a government who does not want to negotiate with the people of Nicaragua and is instead only repressing the people of Nicaragua.
In this battle, the Catholic Church has chosen the protesters' side. Religious leaders come out to support demonstrators who hole up in churches. The Church of Divine Mercy on a university campus in Managua became a battleground. For more than 14 hours, security services besieged protesters who lay wounded on the ground. Father Raul Zamora is a priest at the church.
The paramilitaries, the police, who are working together, attacking the students, they had entered the university and they were going to kill the students.
That's Father Zamora on the right, holding a flag. He shuttled between the frontline barricades and the church that became the front line.
Machine gun, bullets, bombs. You could actually hear the bullets passing by you. A student told me, he said, "What is that red dot that's on the wall, that's going around?" And I knew that that was a laser, I told the students, "Get down."
2 students died that night. That's Father Zamora administering last rites.
Try to help them to put his heart at peace with God, try to confess him, but of course I couldn't do it. He just kept looking at me with his eyes open, like saying, "What happened?" He was still alive. Of course, he was losing a lot of blood, and they were trying to save him, but 15 minutes later, he died. And his name was Gerald.
The Ortega administration went from harassing and assaulting protesters to launching counterattacks that are much more aggressive.
Jeff Thale is the vice president for programs at the Washington Office on Latin America.
Clearly, the government has gotten a lot more aggressive, and the human rights situation has gotten a lot worse.
In 1979, President Daniel Ortega and other Sandinista fighters overthrew Nicaragua's last ruling family, the Somozas. In 1990, Ortega was voted out of power, but he returned in 2007, and ever since, his critics accuse him of becoming an authoritarian strongman.
Naming his wife first as sort of czar over the press, and then as his vice president. Many people expect that she will run for president one day. Naming his children to key positions in the political system and the economy. I think people saw that as establishing a dynasty.
Ortega denied that accusation on Fox News. Ortega says he is only trying to secure a stable Nicaragua, and he's refusing to accept the protesters' demand to move up the next election.
To move up the elections would create instability, insecurity, and make things worse.
Ortega's hardcore supporters defend him as the original and reliable revolutionary. They mark the 39th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution. Ortega denounced the protesters using the language of religion.
As Christians, we are obliged to tell the truth and ask the bishops to rectify for love of God and don't support this satanic, murderous sect of plotters.
But Ortega is fast becoming an international pariah. In addition to today's White House sanctions, a bipartisan Senate bill would target Ortega and other Nicaraguan government officials. And the Organization of American States has condemned his government's human rights abuses, especially on church leaders.
If you hear consistently in every one of those forums that people disapprove of what you're doing on human rights, people want to see you negotiating, it matters. International pressures and economic pressures, banking and financial sanctions can have an impact.
With Venezuela facing 1,000,000% inflation, and the Northern Triangle nations Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala suffering drug violence and gang extortion, Nicaragua's troubles could further destabilize the region and bring problems to the U.S.'s borders.
You talk to experts at any one of a number of migration organizations that follow migration issues, they will tell you that we're going to see an upsurge of Nicaraguan immigrants to the United States.
But so far, the two sides are both holding fast. Ortega refuses to accept responsibility for the victims of the violence. Gerald Vasquez Lopez, the protester given last rites by Father Zamora, was buried in Managua. His funeral was full of remembrance and resistance. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.